Hello everyone and welcome. I'm your host Tyler Kern, and today we're going to be talking about what you need to know before doing a bypass system. And we're thrilled to be joined today by an expert. His name is Norm Rolfe. He's the bypass and CIPP consultant at Holland Pump. Norm, welcome. All right, so let's dive into a few questions here, Norm. So let's start off here. How do you determine the pump quantity for the sewer bypass and backup system?
Pump watch is not cheap. Pump watch is critical. Anytime you're doing a large system like this one, this station takes 138 pump stations in one location and then moves it to the treatment plant from there. It's very, very important. We've got a lot of large pieces of equipment running. Pump watch should be on every bypass that it needs to be on due to public safety, equipment safety, and just general maintenance. When we put a pump watch technician out there, it's a pump technician. Our people know how to read the pumps. Pressure in, pressure out, determine if it's clogging. These are things that most people aren't going to know, and even when we teach them, sometimes it gets forgotten. When your 12-inch pump starts to slow down and your bypass is not operating accordingly, more than likely, you're clogging. At that point, you need to pull the suction line out, clear the strainer, get everything back operational. Pump watch is crucial on any bypass.
Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. Thank you so much, Norm. So how do you determine the peak flow of the pipeline and the type of wastewater?
The way we remove this is very, very simple. Each of these stations have a full valving system, which is for your bypass connection and other items that are on the job site. What we basically are going to do is, one, we're going to have the county, municipality, or contractor turn their electric pump system back on. As soon as we do that, they will start cracking the valve to take the flow from our pumps going in through the bypass port back to the wet well. We'll monitor this as it takes off to make sure the permanent pumps are doing what they need to do. And at that point, we will completely shut our pumps off, close our valve, returning the station back to normal operation. After this, then we will hook up the fresh water to our bypass system, open up the valve slightly on this end, and start to flush our system. So when we cut our pipe, it's nothing but fresh water.
So then why do you need to know the depth of the sewer pipeline and sewage level?
The reason for that is suction lift. The lower the suction lift, the more the discharge we can get out of the pump. Plus, Mother Nature, as we all know, does not allow you to suck once you get to a certain level. So that's when we know we need to use a hydraulic pump, an electric submersible pump, or a different application for the project.
So what information do you need to know before calling a bypass company to make a smooth transition? What sorts of information is really helpful to know before you make that transition?
We need to know suction lift. We need to know discharge distance. If it's a pump station, I need to know the pressures on the discharge of the pump station. We also need to know how many gallons a minute, or the actual gravity pipe size, which we will size the pumps to handle 100% flow, just as a safety factor for you. So get that information and then call your pumper.
You know, public disruption is another thing to think through when it comes to these types of procedures. And so what do you need to do to minimize public disruption? And then also, do you have to plan to have a contingency plan or something along those lines in case something happens?
A lot of times when you're doing a lift station like this one, we're very lucky we're out in the middle of nowhere because it is a master lift station. Most of them are in very residential areas. So you want to always put a silent pump as your primary. You can use it open as the backup if you do not have another silent, but be on alert that if that backup pump does kick on, you're going to get out, you have to get out there. A lot of these smaller pump stations are within 40 feet of someone's home. And if you don't put a silent pump on it, a lot of times people will come over and turn off your pumps. We do not do sewer bypasses if we do not have a contingency plan in place.
So Norm, how do you determine the right pumps?
A couple of different factors that we use. One, of course, is always your total flow involved. Two, you have to know your peak flows and your low flow, because you have to be able to accommodate peak. But in a low flow situation, you don't want a big pump on it. It's better to have a smaller pump on it to handle your low flow. This saves on fuel for the customer and for the municipality.
So after you have the correct pumps and that sort of thing, what other factors are there to consider? What other things need to be thought through?
Other factors that are involved in this are your depth of your water level and also your discharge and your pressure. Some force mains and other things require high head pumps.
Another really common question is, how do you determine if you need to use pipe plugs? Talk us through that determination and that question.
If you're doing a main line, you're going to need them. Sometimes when you do a station, even though it's got a bunch of valves, you're going to need them. Always size your plug properly by the footprint that the plug will actually cover when inflated. And do not exceed any inflation pressure. Always best to buy your plugs rather than to rent your plugs. That way you know you're getting new for your job.
Another big question is about materials. So what kinds of materials do you need are needed for a bypass system?
Material needed for this job is going to be your suction, your discharge, your pumps, check valves, gate valves, float systems to automatically operate your lag pump and your backup pump in case we have a mechanical issue. For this job, we're going to be using HDPE, high density polyethylene, 18-inch, which will carry the flow from the station and put it right into the force main.
And then finally, let's talk about some of the precautions necessary. What precautions do you take to make sure there are no environmental leakages or spills or things along those lines?
First off, when we fuse this pipe, when we get done building the entire manifold in the run of the HDPE, it will be pressure tested at 3 times operating pressure for the actual force main, and it will have to hold pressure for 45 minutes. When we get done with this, we're going to also be adding a saddle tap with a 4-inch connection. What this will be for is so we can go to the local water source, flush the system, flush the pumps before we break any hoses so we don't spill sewer anywhere.
Excellent stuff. Well, Norm, thank you so much for joining us here today and talking to us a little bit more about what you need to know before doing a bypass system. And everyone out there, thank you for joining us as well. Stay tuned for more content coming your way from Holland Pump, more educational content, answering the questions that matter most to you. So stay tuned for that. But for this one, for Norm Rolfe, I'm Tyler Kern. We'll talk to you again soon.